G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, World War III update. Looks like there's a little bit more going on in the world than usual, but not too much unusual. Unusual is the new usual, so looks like our favorite whack job over there in North Korea has disbanded some of his navy to go out and play Red October there. Looks like 50 North Korean submarines are basically unaccounted for. Now, most of the North Korean submarines are really old, like 1950s technology type stuff. How good are they? I don't know, but they are. A submarine's a submarine is a submarine. It's really more based on the crew than just about anything. Uh, with the most advanced submarines in the world, okay, which can hear, a wrench drop in another submarine halfway across the world almost. Even at that, finding a submarine is really the ultimate stealth. So even a low-tech submarine can be hard to detect. Now, North Korea got blamed for sinking a South Korean ship last year with a torpedo. Whether they did or didn't, of course, the North denies it. And then, of course, what's going on right now is after about a week or so ago, when North Korea was apparently accused of putting landmines out, and two South Korean soldiers stepped on these landmines, which then forced South Korea to, use its loudspeakers to put out anti-North Korean propaganda, which the North then fired a shot to say, turn down your stereo. And shelling goes back and forth. Now, there's usually a couple exchanges every year, a couple of times a year, 3 or 4 tantrums a year. Usually the North will throw a tantrum to get aid, is usually what it does. Like they'll usually throw a tantrum. But some of the political analysts out there are saying, and I got this off the David Pakman show, which he's usually on the other side of the coin from what I from my points of view. But his sources were saying that this is not regular activity for the North. Like it's kind of regular, but there's something. The disbanding of the Navy is kind of new. 50 submarines. We don't know where they went. I'm sure they'll be found fairly easy, but again, we don't know where these submarines would be heading to. My suspect, and this is why they're saying this, is that the North usually throws a tantrum and then they calm down. All they're demanding is that South Korea apologizes to them, and the South is doing whatever, slowly appeasing North Korea. But also the leader in South Korea doesn't want to appear weak to Kim Jong-un, because if she does, then what'll end up happening is it'll give North Korea a false sense of security that they can get away with a lot more. So the problem there is quite simple. If it could escalate into something much, much, much worse. We know North Korea is backed by China, and we know South Korea is backed by the United States, and we also know with Article 5, we get pulled into a nuclear war very quickly with North Korea. Always been kind of, I'd say up to 2010, it was probably the most volatile spot on the planet. When I was a kid, it was always, everybody always speculated that World War III will start in North Korea, because it's at an armistice, not a natural ceasefire. Meaning you don't shoot, we don't shoot. But however, if you play your stereo too loud, we're going to fire artillery at you and disband our navy out there to God knows where. So the North doing that, where would they be sending their subs? Well, I think they would be sending their subs to go after the people who would be threatening them the most. Not necessarily the South Koreans. Don't get me wrong, the South Korean army is well prepared for the North. They are well prepared for the North for sure. Much better training. They got U.S. equipment much better. And plus, in light of all this little activity, the United States has sent B-52 bombers to South Korea, and some B-2 bombers to Guam. And stuff like that. So at the end of the day, we can see that the people are taking this pretty seriously, and they should. Obviously, they should. The big threat from North Korea is the ballistic missiles. They don't have many, but someone's going to get nuked. The good news is right after that, there is no more North Korea after that. And I don't really know if China will really go to bat for North Korea. It's, you got to look at it logically. Like the North Koreans. Is the useful idiot to China? Sure, to provoke the states, but would they be willing to, get their entire country destroyed over North Korea? Talking about the Chinese, obviously I don't think they care about the North Koreans that much. They have a border there, and they'll shoot North Koreans that try to defect into China. So, it's I mean, they let some come in, but they will shoot them coming across the border. So, really, from the government top level, the what people were saying is that Kim Jong-un aunt and uncle that he had put to death there for treason and all that, or whatever trumped up charges that they had, were the Chinese connection for the control of North Korea. So Kim Jong-un was basically not really in control, but then he kind of killed off the people that were in control, so technically now he's in control. So that makes China nervous, that makes the United States nervous, that definitely makes the South Koreans very, very nervous. And, but the nice thing about North Korea, though, is they always win Earth Hour for, least amount of hydro use. Well, it's very easy when everybody there is pretty much living without, you got power to like one major city, maybe 2 cities or 3 cities or whatever for the manufacturing. But they're still in the Stone Age. Like North Korea is wow, and yet we look at all these other people like, oh, we got to go overthrow this government, that government. If it was really about, if all these wars around the world were really about U.S. intervention with the foreign policy, were really about humanitarian aid, if there's a country that needs to have its dictatorship overthrown, it's definitely North Korea. That said, why don't we go after North Korea? Is it because they're armed with nukes? Not really. Again, they don't have a lot of nukes, but that doesn't mean you can discount them out. Yes, most of their army is pretty old and stuff like that, but the thing about North Koreans, what I think, obviously the biggest threat they pose to is South Korea. That's the obvious. Does their K-41 missile, I think is their newest missile, it does have a 6,500 mile range, but again, these things are in limited numbers. So yeah, they could do it. They're going to get 1 or 2 nukes out, but after that, there will be no North Korea, because B-52s will, basically cultivate the land there. It would just be aerial bombardment after aerial bombardment. It'd be a complete genocide of the people. And if the South ever does run north, it's going to be a complete genocide of the people there. They're just going to kill everybody. They're not going to take any chances. It'll be a be-all, end-all. That said, the South doesn't really want to go to war with them. They'd rather integrate. They do want to work with the North Koreans, but you can't work with the North Koreans because they have a crazy government. And when you have people brainwashed to that level, I mean, every time you get like a North Korean defector, they don't know what to. They don't, and they might make it to the States or Europe or someplace. They don't know how to, like. They ask permission to go to the bathroom. They don't know what to do. They really don't know what to do. They can't function in a normal society because of their mental conditioning. Mind you, you can understand it because I mean, the people there are resorting to cannibalism because they're not fed. And yet people walk around with those communist CCCP shirts on. It makes me want to slap. Or Che Guevara shirts. It's like I want to slap them. If you understand what communism is, everybody's equal as long as I have more. All hail Kim Jong-un, right? So, but anyway, we don't know where these subs are, but I would suspect that they would be probably have a predetermined place to go that would probably coincide to ambushing U.S. warships. That would be the best suspect, because really for the North, the people that are going to be the most threatening to them is the United States. Yes, technically South Korea is on the border, but it's the people rendering aid to South Korea that will be the threat. So that's where I think the North will go. Plus, they'd probably send these submarines to take out South Korean warships, etc., etc. And they would be going into to destroy naval ports is what they'd be doing. Why? Because that's, he who controls the sea controls just about everything. Big threat from North Korea would be the artillery. Again, the major threat would be to the south. But there's another thing we don't know what North Korea has in terms of chemical weapons. That's the other thing, because those are a lot easier to get than nukes. They do have nukes, but sarin gas is much cheaper to produce than and anthrax and chlorine gas. A lot easier to produce artillery shells with that than it is a nuke. The nukes are really for lobbing over at the United States. And if the North and the South attack each other, the North knows that it's done. That's it. I mean, yeah, 1950s North Korea versus 1950s United States. It's still an analog war at that point, a little more advanced than World War II, slightly better tanks. You got the M60 Patton in there. You've got that kind of stuff. You've got better artillery, slightly better radio communications, but you're still talking mostly an analog war where you don't know where the other guy quite is. Nowadays, the North Korean Air Force does, they have a handful of MiG-29s. I don't know how many exactly, but they're still flying like MiG-23s and MiG-21s and that type of thing. Even with upgrades, I mean, these are still a lot older airplanes, but I don't think they'd last very long in a conventional war against F-15s and A-10s, and particularly A-10s would have a field day with the North Korean airfields for sure. Again, where the big thing is going to be is that their threat to South Korea would be mostly rockets, maybe chemical rockets. The rocket stuff is definitely a threat for sure. But an Apache gunship helicopter would have a field day over North Korean territory. Not that it wouldn't be dangerous for the pilots. Obviously, it would be because the North does have a fair amount of stuff. Especially their little tactical tractors that they have there. But those things are going to be very mobile. There's not too many places they're not going to be able to go, and they're small. So the damage it can again, don't underestimate the North in that sense, but as far as their submarines making it to the U.S. coast or maybe even Guam, in Hawaii, stuff like that, you could see them attempt it. 50 submarines isn't really going to get that far. They're going to be spread too thin to really do any major damage. But where I think they would be more deadly is not so much going after warships, but going after commercial shipping. So I could see the North Koreans sinking the Shanghai Express or something like that, which is the largest, one of three large German freighters, the largest three freighters in the world type of thing. I forget the name of it. I know one's called the Shanghai Express, but anyway, it barely fits through the Panama Canal. And if they were to sink something like that, that would have economic devastation on not so much just the loss of the merchants on board, but the loss of the ship itself would severely cripple trade. Now, it looks like 12 people were arrested in China for the explosion last week at the 10th largest harbor or 5th largest harbor that they have out of their 10 major ports. It wasn't a nuke going off. Number one, not bright enough. Number two, no EMP. Number three, nobody's dropping dead from radiation poison. So it does look like it was a typical chemical fire. And again, we know the Chinese don't have any environmental laws hardly at all. So of course, it would be very easy to sabotage those areas. I haven't heard much more about the explosion on the U.S. military base in Japan. So who knows what's going on there. And then I heard there was another explosion over in Russia. I didn't hear too much about it, but again, watch for this kind of sabotage stuff. I remember I was talking about that, a couple of years ago, right after the Boston bombing. A week later, like one refinery blows up in Texas, another one blows up almost a week to the day after that, and then all these train derailments and stuff like that. I mean, here in Canada, we've had more than enough radical environmental groups talk about derailing trains, so you never know what really happens. And then how much is it from, the rough shape of the economy and deregulation? You start deregulating things. Next thing you know, it can help business, but it can also lead to a lot of environmental disasters too. Safety issues, right? So anyway, I digress from there. So that's what the North seems to be up. Again, if they were going to make an attack on anything, I would think some subs would probably go after the naval ports for sure. It makes sense. That's the whole point of a submarine, right? I mean, think about it. They get near a harbor or a port, depending on how it's set up. But if they can sink a ship in a harbor to basically hold the rest of the South Korean Navy into a harbor somewhere, again, I'm not 100% sure how all their naval ports are set up, but you can see that it could, block traffic and stuff like that. It's kind of like the Iranians if they were to sink warships, or even just sink freighters in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz there. Gives them the upper hand. But they've got mines over there. That's another thing that these submarines could be doing is planting mines. Again, being older technology, these diesel electric subs might be quiet enough to be able to pull it off, but to go, say, toe-to-toe with a Virginia-class submarine, the advantage of these submarines is that they're smaller, meaning they can get into shallower waters. In other words, perfect for attacking a harbor. They're not much bigger than a little bit bigger, but not much bigger than a typical World War II U-boat. Some of them are even smaller. Iran has about 50 midget submarines, which would be very devastating in the Strait of Hormuz. Why? Again, that shallow water. These guys are in 20 feet of water, and they can hide under a warship and sneak into a harbor and create all kind of havoc. I don't think they'll make it out of the harbor, but again, a Pearl Harbor style attack from under the water would be quite devastating. Torpedoes or whatever. So it's hard to say where these submarines would go, but if you were to strategize it and you had 50 submarines, which is about 75% of their fleet, They're older. Okay, I'm sure the North. I know there's a lot. If you ever watch North Korean propaganda stuff, it's quite hilarious to watch. But it's so dramatic. Makes like a Mexican soap opera look. Like a serious show. But the thing is that you got to think. Yes, I'm sure their generals aren't stupid. You never know. I mean, you never know. They could be convinced of their own superiority, and that's just lunacy waiting to happen. But I don't think so. I think they know exactly how dilapidated their military and their navy actually is. So they're going to have to do stuff within the abilities of what they have. So again, predestination. Get these submarines into a harbor, sink commercial shipping, sink. If you're lucky enough to sink a few warships, great. They'll be sacrificial lambs for sure. But I think they would mostly go after commercial shipping just to wreak that kind of havoc. Just because, again, one Virginia-class submarine against 50 North Korean submarines is not a fair fight. They've got to get another 100 submarines in there, But you never know. Again, the captain, you shut everything down on a submarine, you can't find it. You know, it depends on how loud the thing is. Again, we don't know you never underestimate the capabilities. Especially with a submarine. Again, it's the cat and mouse game that you'd have to play. So I think once they detect where a North Korean submarine is, they'll be able to follow it anywhere it goes. But it's just that initial, where are they in the first place? So it's a big search to find them. And, do you find them before they launch the torpedoes or after they launch the torpedoes? So it's kind of like going after 50 Red Octobers. I'm sure they probably already tracked some down by now. With the P8 Poseidons and electronic warfare stuff, and the CP Aurora or the P8 Orions, we call them CP-140 Auroras here. Those are dedicated sub hunters, and I'm pretty sure they would do that. But again, shipping would be one thing they would go after if they could get a warship. I'm sure they would try it, but I think it'd be more to block ports and block navies from coming in and wreak havoc that way. That makes more sense. The other thing, it could be just for surveillance, or the more obvious one, the one that would actually benefit the North Koreans the most, mine setting. So if all of a sudden we just see there's merchant ships getting blown up from sea mines, well, we know what those North Korean subs were doing, and they would most likely, rather than attack a harbor, drop a sea mine going into the harbor. So depending on how good the minesweepers are, that's one thing our Navy's known for is we're in the Strait of Hormuz right now with our minesweepers, because we got 12 good minesweepers, 12 good frigates, and I guess we're down to zero destroyers right now, but technically you could say we have 2 destroyers left. One's decommissioned because of an accident. The other one's decommissioned. They're all decommissioned because of age. One was sunk in a rim pack exercise, just because of age, decommissioned or whatever. So we have, I think, the Athabaskan and the Iroquois. Athabaskan and the Algonquin, I think, are the 2 left, but I think it's the Algonquin that was damaged. But that said, the North Korean or the South Koreans, they would be probably out there with the minesweepers and what have you, and the be out there with helicopters and everything. So if I was Kim Jong-un, I'd be telling them, go set the sea mines all over the place, get the divers to swim under the boat, set the charges, that type of thing. That makes sense what these submarines be used for. Because again, as soon as they launch a torpedo, everybody's going to know where they are. So unless they do an all-out launch of torpedoes and sink as many ships as they can in the shortest amount of time, I mean, they're dead anyway at that point. But if they can get in there, plant the mines, get out of there, detonate when they need to, that makes more sense. That said, the United States is also sending a U.S. Submarine to the area. I believe it's probably going to be a Virginia-class submarine. So this is where you're getting that. This is kind of unusual. This is not just a few, a little tit for tat between North Korea and South Korea. It seems like the world is responding. But we also have to look at what else is going on in the world. Again, looks like another stock market crash again today. They're not calling it that. They're just saying it's a tough economy. But you can hear, we're having an election up here in Canada right now. Sorry, little perch. And, I mean, Canadians are outraged. It's an 11-week campaign. Imagine if we ever had, right now there's, a 2-year campaign in the States, but anyway, I digress. But you have Justin Trudeau, which is one guy running, and he comes out, and for weeks on end, he's been pretty much saying that, no, we haven't, we're not going to run a deficit, we're going to balance the budget. Now what comes out today, and it sounds very decisive what he's saying, we're going to run $10 billion a year deficit, and we're going to balance the budget in 2019. So it means we're going to go right into deficit right away because he's saying we're in a recession and we want to, invest in infrastructure, spend our way out of debt, I guess. And the money that will be, I do agree, yeah, we need to invest in infrastructure. That makes sense. But what he's telling you is that, what he's basically saying is, he's using the excuse that, hey, if I win, we're going to have a massive deficit, no matter what. And one of the reporters actually finally asked him a tough question. In all fairness, some people do ask him tough questions, but for the most part, they've been handling Thomas Mulcair and Trudeau with baby gloves. But one thing they said, well, is your commitment to $10 billion a year, if let's say the economy gets really rough, and that's the number one issue up here in Canada, is the economy, and I think around the world. If the economy gets really tough, will you go above that? And he wouldn't answer the question. He said, no, we're going to invest in the infrastructure, yada yada yada, and the same line over and over, right? So that tells you he knows what's going on. Now, Thomas Mulcair, he also knows what's going on. His take's a little different. Going to raise taxes on everybody, carbon tax this, carbon tax that. And then, of course, Harper's out there saying, yes, the world economy is pretty much scrapped, and we want to keep doing what we're doing because, yes, you could say, and Justin Trudeau said, and this is what he was saying, was, hey, look, it's been the worst economy growth for the Canadian economy in 80 years. But here's the thing. Here's what Harper's saying. We've been growing very small, but we have been growing. And I've been saying, you guys heard me, like growth is growth. It's like 0.1% per year. So 6 years of continuous growth and lowering taxes and, yes, through austerity. That's how it's the only way you're going to lower taxes in this day and age is you have to cut government spending. Where you cut the spending, that's where the debate goes, but you get the idea. You can't spend your way out of debt. So he's pretty much... he's saying we're going to just keep doing the same thing. So he's going to do the same thing. We're going to expect the same thing, right? But what they're all saying is the world economy is really, really shaky right now. And that's probably the biggest factor in what's probably going on in North Korea right now. They got the Americans, not the American people, but the government. The American government has to get World War III going. They can't kick this can down the road too much further. The people are starting to notice that they're becoming too poor. Now, they will kick the can down the road. I say there will be no war until, or no economic collapse till war comes. But the thing is people are going to start rising up in the streets because every time they kick the can down the road, somebody lost their retirement, somebody lost their savings, somebody lost something, or there's a service you're not going to be getting. You're going to be paying for it, but give you an idea in Canada, and now here's what I'm talking about being in the under NDP and stuff like that. Now, the poll was how Canadians are taxed. They're taxed so much that for every dollar a Canadian makes, we only really get to see 21 cents of it after taxes. This is on everything we buy, cost of living, etc., etc. This is the average Canadian. For every $1 we make, we only really get to see 21 cents. Yeah. And I digress. And we're doing good. And we're doing good in comparison to a lot of other countries. So the economy is the number one issue for everybody. Now, also, what's going on in China now? Mind you, remember everything's kind of rigged in together. And you got to think about it as one big game. One of the things they're doing again today is dumping U.S. Treasuries. I can't remember the number, but they're dumping them. So again, people around the world are isolating themselves off from the United States. They don't want to use the U.S. dollar anymore. Why? It's too bloody. The United States is at war with everybody, and again, I know that most of my viewers are American, and I'm not picking on America itself. I'm picking on your government. People around the world are terrified. There was a recent poll. I forget who conducted it and what. Again, we don't know what questions were asked, but it was polled throughout Europe and the world what the number one threat to global security was. Most people picked the United States. That was above ISIS. That was above just about anything, because I think a lot of people understanding what's going on. War is a racket. We're going to war for the sake of going to war for some bankers to make money. That's it. But we also know that the banking system is so rigged that there's no possible way it can be bailed out again without a massive pitchfork revolution, which we've heard tons of world elites getting really, really nervous about that. So the economy, as the economy goes whack job, watch what happens in the world. Things are going to start blowing up. People are going to start shooting at each other. We're talking world wars everywhere. Between nations you wouldn't even think would go to war. We're talking mass destabilization. Why? Because desperate people will do desperate things. Now, one thing there won't be is debt jubilee and a Iceland solution where they forgive the debt for the people and hold the bankers and the politicians accountable and throw them in jail. But we looked at what happened in Iceland. They did do this, and this helped out. Their coffers are full. They're getting, I don't know if they have a fully balanced budget, but pretty close. Now here in Canada, we're starting with a balanced budget. So right away, Justin Trudeau is out there saying that, no, we're going to go 10 billion in deficit to kickstart the economy. Harper's saying, well, we're pretty much at a balanced budget, and okay, growth is slow, but we'll just ride the storm. We're not going to run a bigger deficit. I think we should be listening to Harper on this one. I know there's a lot of people who hate him, and I get that, but he is the safer bet. He is definitely the safer bet. And again, I'm not giving the man a reading endorsement. It's just, I'm telling you, 2 plus 2 does not equal 5. It will never equal 5. You just listen to these politicians talk. You know, none of them have your best interest. But the one in Canada that's that's going to weather the storm the best is going to be the Conservatives. All the other ones are talking about massive tax hikes. Again, so that means out of the 21 cents per dollar that the average Canadian sees, we might see 18 cents, and that's going to help the middle class. No, they're talking spending their way out of debt. But when we look around the world, this is the common theme, and this is one thing my prime minister, or current prime minister, or re-challenging prime minister is saying for the election, is that the plan that the NDP and the Liberals have here in Canada is the same as Greece and Spain, and it is basically spend your way to debt. It's Keynesian economics, and this is the problem. You can't sell the future to live a better now. At some point, the future catches up to you, and that's what we're dealing with now. People, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, were starting to build a system where you were starting to see bigger retirements, more government spending, larger governments, that type of thing. And of course, none of this stuff is sustainable. They run big deficits. Pretty much every country in the world has a deficit right now. But a deficit with a balanced budget and under $1 trillion is, is good for most countries. As long as you have it, you're starting off there. We're all not going to be going into a recession. Don't worry about the recession. It's the depression that we have to worry about. Because when that starts happening, people are going to start dying off anyway, and that's going to create massive revolts everywhere. There's no country that's going to be unfazed by this economic crash. Hence why they got to get us into war ASAP. If they can't bounce us into a war with Russia or China, because the Russians and the Chinese, they know what's going on, and they're not stupid. Particularly the Chinese, they're fighting an economic war. Currency war, trade war, shooting war. And that's what they're doing. They're fighting this war as economic, to collapse the other systems. Again, they're making their dollar so attractive right now and giving up U.S. treasuries, making the U.S. basically creating hyperinflation in the United States. The thing is, where's that hyperinflation going to come out? I mean, it's a pretty scary time. We are at war. There's no anybody that can't see that. Like, again, I'm not fear-mongering, I'm not scare-tacting, I'm just telling you what's actually going on in the world. Is there some speculation? Sure, but these are on events that are happening. This is the part you need to be concerned about, is, where are those 50 subs? Now, over there in Russia, of course, you have a lot of things going on there too. The Russians, they're mobilizing their S-400 systems and about 8,000 other pieces of equipment, getting ready for a big war. And those S-400 systems, right now, NATO and the United States don't really have much of a counter to those things. These things, the S-300s, that's the system that was used, I believe, in either Serbia or Bosnia or wherever. I can't remember, or maybe it was in Jordan. I can't remember where it was, but where the F-117 stealth fighter Nighthawk got shot down. That was the system that shot it down, and that's at a time when the most stealthiest aircraft on the planet, the B-2 and the F-117, that's about as invisible to radar as you can get, and this system found it and shot it down. And that's an older generation. That's the other thing you got to keep in mind. That was a couple years ago, and that's an older generation. The new generation, the S-400 system, this thing is there's probably about 30 pieces to it. It's different levels. The S-300, 400, and 500 missile systems are basically different levels of protection. You have things like the S-8 Panzer, or S-12 Panzer, which has about 12 little short-range missiles on it, good for shooting down maybe incoming artillery, helicopters, low-flying jets, etc., like that. The next one up would be like the Tor M. That thing, again, to intercept missiles, helicopters, even anti-tanks you can be used as an anti-tank weapon at range, kind of like our ADATS is. And then it goes up to the SA-11 type of thing, where okay, now you're talking medium range up to maybe 20, 30, 40,000 feet, shooting down bombers, aircraft, drones, you name it, whatever fly. If it's got wings, it'll be targeting it. And then you get into the bigger S-300 missile systems, which fire several hundred kilometers, up to about 400 kilometers, and they can shoot down pretty much intercontinental missiles. They could shoot down, name the aircraft, AWACS, whatever, out to that distance. So it's a huge umbrella of a system. And also, it can actually shoot down low Earth orbit satellites. So that's a pretty impressive thing. Well, at least that's what it's supposed to do. Whether it can, whether it can't, but you get the idea. This thing is pretty state of the art for what it is. It doesn't mean it's invincible, but it is a huge threat. Now, Russia moving them around is not a big deal, but moving so many of these pieces, and they're also moving, the other usual suspects such as Topol-M and Iskanders and stuff like that, which the Iskanders for coastal defense would be very lethal because they can be nuclear armed, but there's typically like a small Scud launcher, but it has a range of about 500 miles. So this is definitely would be murder in the Baltics, or murder in the murder in the in the Black Sea type of thing, if they were to use those there. Kaliningrad is one of the places where will most likely be putting these. They were talking a few weeks ago. They're going to put some there, but they're going to have them as a nuclear deterrent. Now, we already know about the Topol-Ms in the Crimea. They say they're there. They say they're not there. They say they're there again. They say they're not there. But it seems like they're there, and that type of thing. We also know there's S-300 missile systems in the Crimea. The Ukrainian military is all but pretty much given up on the Minsk II agreement. So has the rebels. So we know that that's going to be an all-out offensive at some point. Somebody made a good comment in one of my videos the other day that how the Ukrainian military wasn't flying many sorties anymore, they were just getting shot down too much. And that gives you an idea. Yes, they are flying around in Soviet technology, that's for sure. Su-27s, MiG-29s, Su-25 Frogfoots, attack aircraft, and of course, the Heinz and the Hype, helicopters that they're flying around in, and stuff like that. And of course, the rebels on the other side and the Russians on the other side, they're basically, they know how to target these things. They know the vulnerable parts of these things. So that does make sense that the Ukrainian Air Force would have a hard time. Plus, they're going to have a hard time probably getting some parts for yes, Ukraine manufactured a lot of military equipment for Russia, but they probably don't manufacture everything. So there's probably parts they can't get, etc., etc. Now, it comes out, looks like about 2,000 Russians have been killed in the Ukrainian conflict so far, so people are starting to notice that. Something to keep an eye on there. So we know that the Russians, I think they're in it for the long haul, but they're going to bleed it out. So even if they have a body count like that going back to Russia, which isn't going to be very popular, but on the other hand, I'm pretty sure the way the Putin is, he's pretty much saying, look, the United States is trying to start a war with us. And he is kind of right. I mean, I'm not saying he's a good guy, but he is right. But the thing is they know that all they have to do is back the rebels. They don't have to intervene directly, and because they're not going to intervene directly, it just becomes a proxy war that bleeds out and destroys Ukraine in the long run. And so they can't get that war going there. They can't get it starting. The only way Russia is going to respond is if the Ukraine tries to push into Russia or push into the Crimea. That's the only thing that's going to get a response, pretty much. And at that point, NATO can't really justify it. They're not really. We see what's going on. We also see the F-22 Raptors flying over to Europe too to back again. Every time the military commanders come out and say, "No, this has nothing to do with Russia," but yet, it does. I mean, they're not bringing it to, like France or Germany or someplace like that. No, they're bringing it within the region of conflict, or potential conflict, right? So we see what's going on there. So the U.S. markets, they're getting hammered. There's got to be a lot of nervous people right now. A lot of financial pundits out there that don't know what's going on, strangely enough, and then there's others that are telling you the truth, saying, look, an October collapse, mid-September to October is the most likely for the next economic collapse, but this one's going to be ginormous. It will be the equivalent of the atomic collapse. It's going to kill people through austerity. It's going to kill people through starvation, lack of resources, and then just wars breaking out everywhere. So that's what we have to look forward to. This is what the world elites want. This is what they're going to get, because if they don't go to war, the people are just starting to notice that they're becoming too poor, and that's kind of where the pitchfork revolution idea kind of comes in, that the world elites were talking about pretty much all this year and last year, whatever, buying bunkers and all over the world just to get be able to get out. But it don't really matter, because not one of these people will be tracked down by not so much the common man. The common man, they're not going to do anything. You took my money, they'll go to the street, maybe throw a Molotov cocktail or so. But those aren't the people they have to worry about. It's the people that say, "Where's my money?" and they start breaking legs and heads and burning people in barrels like they do, the Mexican cartel does. They're going to put a tire around you and light you on fire. That's what they're going to do. You're going to have politicians and bankers hanging from street lamps on this one. Why? Because when you steal maybe a few million or 100 million from somebody, these people usually have enough money put away to hire the hitmen. So watch for world elites just having accidents and suicides. These things are going to become very, very common very, very, very shortly. What's going on? And of course, you can have your typical Wall Street psychopath who's going to lose everything and jump off buildings or whatever. That's going to happen too. It happened a bit in 2008, but mostly over there somewhere. Now, one last thing I guess I'll touch up on is the Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama migrant crisis by overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi. Look, it's getting so bad right now. And there's a lot of things I talked about. I said, watch out for gunboats in the Mediterranean. Okay, so we had one so far, one incident there. But it looks like today there was a ship that showed up with 500 people on it, with 100 people dead. Okay, so I don't know, maybe the people just crushed each other on the boat. Who knows? How they died on there? Who knows? And then, of course, there was a truck found in Greece, like a transport delivery style truck, and there was a bunch of people dead in the back of there. So it looks like, and then of course we've seen all these places refugee places getting burnt, stuff like that. The protests are getting bigger, the anti-immigration protests, and it's pro and anti going at it too. But I think at the end of the day, again, watch for the rise of the army of Brevniks. You're just going to see refugees getting slaughtered. Poland is basically, I think it was Poland, they were saying that we're going to take some refugees only if they were Christian. Other places like in Hungary, they're building a fence. Germany's supposed to take 800,000, that type of thing. So it's a major crisis, but this crisis came to be, and this is the part that nobody on the mainstream media is talking about, was the butterfly effect of overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, when he had the foresight to say, you do this, and of course it's going to lead to, sectarian violence to the likes we've never seen. And he was right. He was right. And of course, Hillary Clinton, I hope she sleeps well tonight, because, we do believe it's worth it, right? So, but that again, hundreds of people, a few thousand people have died floating in the Mediterranean there, and this has all been orchestrated. So this is going to have huge implications too. And we do know that a lot of these migrants, most of them are going to be Muslim, because they're coming from typically Muslim regions, and we see the brutality of the Christians that are coming over. Again, we had Christians on boats that were getting thrown off. If there was more Muslims on the boat than Christians, they were throwing them overboard and stuff like that. So we'll have to watch and see what happens there. But there's also a lot of Muslim men that are coming in, and I have nothing against Muslims per se, but again, when you have an open border type of thing, and basically a migrant crisis is a border issue, right? There's going to be a great potential for jihadists coming in on that. To think that every one of these guys is a sweet innocent, I think that's a little bit naive. So we'll have to watch out for that. I'm pretty sure, like I called the 2015 prediction that I said, the year of terror, terror, terror. Watch out. We're probably going to see more of that. But there's also going to be, and this is something I said for my Muslim audience, I know people around the world tune in, but something I said and to watch out for is that there's only going to be a handful of terrorist attacks that are going to be tolerated in Europe and elsewhere. Even the DHS in the United States is worried about, patriot groups basically taking up arms against Muslims. So we can see it coming. You can see it coming, that it's going to be a culture clash. It is a culture clash going on now. It's just, it's who's going to throw the first stone is really going to be and once that stone gets tossed, it's just going to be a brawl. Again, like a 10th Crusade, just people beat each other over the head in the streets. So if we got people that are getting killed now behind the scenes, left in a pickup truck on the side of the road, or a transport truck on the side of the road, watch for mass shootings, mass stuff like that. So it's going to get bad. It's going to get really bad. So be safe out there. And like I said, European countries, North America, stuff like that, it's going to be dangerous for the Muslims in the near future, just because people aren't going to tolerate it. And we're at a time when everybody's starting to feel an economic pinch. So the blame game goes around. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's just that's the way the world kind of works. And I'd rather be honest with you than not. I never call for violence. I always want people to do well, but we do live in some really crazy times right now. It's not scare tactic or scaremongering. It's telling you the truth. Just pay attention to what's going on. Again, I don't know how anybody can watch reality shows and then ignore reality. And if we weren't ignoring reality, maybe we wouldn't have these problems in the first place. But you can see how everything is related. You overthrow Gaddafi, you have a migrant crisis. You support ISIS to overthrow Assad. You see all the stuff that's going on there. And we'll have to watch out, again, what the North Koreans are doing. I'm predicting as the stock markets gets more crazy, you're going to see a lot more crazier stories on the news of stuff like North Korea, South Korea, whatever else it might be, just due to the fact that they can't really talk about the economic stuff too much, because people are going to start asking the main questions. Well, if you're proposing bailing these people out again, the bankers, what reforms were made in 2008, and when people realized there were no reforms made in 2008, the bankers just doubled down on what they were doing that led to 2008. Just like before 9/11, there was going to 9/11 covered up an economic collapse that happened roughly about that time too. And there was a whole bunch, LIBOR scandal and all that in Building 7, that they had all that stuff was lost in that investigation. So it just kicked the can down the road. That's all it did. So with that said, you never know. We could see some sort of nuclear crisis or chemical attack, or who knows what would happen. So just be careful out there. Be ready for anything. Again, the world elites are insane. They are completely, utterly insane. They will do anything to protect their hegemony. That it's more clear than ever. But with that said, we just got to keep an eye on what is going on out there. So nuclear bombers going all over the place again, not completely out of character, not really anything new, but the timing, the missing, you got 50 North Korean subs out there somewhere. Who knows what they're really doing? How much effect are they going to have? I don't know. We could see an escalation between the North and the South. That's a possibility. We know about nuclear B-2s going to Guam, which is not unreasonable, but because they're usually always stationed there. But at the time, with what's going on, Russia's, again, gearing up a bit more too. NATO's gearing up. You have F-22s going there to, again, adding more equipment into the Eastern European theater to come. People in Eastern Europe, remember, the world elites, you can pretty much tell that they want to have the war there. They don't want to have it in like Germany or France or England or any place like that. They want the Eastern European people to get killed fighting Russia, to weaken Russia. In other words, what's going on right now is kind of playing out perfect, but to what they want, except for Russia isn't involved. What they really wanted was Russia to roll right into the Ukraine and have a war there for years and years and years. But the Russians, they're too smart for this. They've already seen what happened. Again, it's the same play with the Russians in Afghanistan back in the 70s and 80s. And the United States still does that same, arm the Mujahideen in a proxy war to overthrow the Russians. They're still doing that. Like, it's the same play over and over again. The Russians have caught on. Hence, all they have to do is bleed it out by letting the Eastern people basically do the fighting. Maybe a handful of, again, when you really think about 2,000 Russian soldiers, yeah, that's a lot, but it's a handful. It's a handful. It's not 20,000, 200,000, 2 million. It's not World War II. The Russians, trust me, they'll sit that one out. They'll sit that one out. And they'll just let it bleed out slowly. It will hurt NATO more than it'll hurt anything. But however, this whole incident has made NATO relative. Again, always ask who benefits, and that's one of the things we have to look at. So, with that said, again, financially, I don't give financial advice because I'm not a financial advisor. Be careful out there. I don't know what you're invested in or not invested in. you have to make decisions for yourself, but I would recommend buy a bit of food just to get yourself through the winter if you're up here in Canada, because things could get very, very expensive very, very quick, especially if China keeps flooding US dollars back to the States. Um, Again, the United States is not going to bully China. I think if it comes to it, yes, the Chinese will stand their ground economically. So, yeah, you might see some more explosions in China. I don't really know if they can get a war going between Taiwan and China or Japan and China to destabilize China, but they might be able to do it. And if they could do that, then the United States can let Japan take the brunt of the war and back them on the back end. But because of NATO, if anybody goes to war pretty much with China, we're all sucked into it. Meaning you don't get a choice; you have to go fight China. The Chinese also know this, so they're going to fight the war pretty much the way they've said was going to be fought economic, and that's it. They're going to own the United States after they're done sending back the treasuries. So it's either you give us your property or we send your treasuries back. And once they send the treasuries back, they can do it a little bit at a time just to devalue their currency to make more business for them. So basically, the United States is being isolated economically by several different nations around the world that are dropping their dollars. So we have to watch out for that. But right now, the economy, the economic crash that's kind of playing out in front of us, that's what we have to look at. As soon as it rebounds, they've propped it up, but they're running out of options to prop it up. And there's some financial guys out there saying that the U.S. Fed has no more bullets in its gun. They've done everything they can. The only thing they've got left is QE4. But even at that, again, it doesn't really matter. People are starting to notice that they're becoming too poor. So at that, I'm going to leave it at that. We'll have to watch out for crazier things going on. But anyway, if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below for thank you to everybody who has, and that's just for the channel. You can also check out my WW3 updates Facebook page or Twitter. It's not RegMe, and I just posted this video there. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, World War III update. Looks like there's a little bit more going on in the world than usual, but not too much unusual. Unusual is the new usual, so looks like our favorite whack job over there in North Korea has disbanded some of his navy to go out and play Red October there. Looks like 50 North Korean submarines are basically unaccounted for. Now, most of the North Korean submarines are really old, like 1950s technology type stuff. How good are they? I don't know, but they are. A submarine's a submarine is a submarine. It's really more based on the crew than just about anything. With the most advanced submarines in the world, okay, which can hear a wrench drop in another submarine halfway across the world almost, even at that, finding a submarine is really the ultimate stealth. So even a low-tech submarine can be hard to detect. Now, North Korea got blamed for sinking a South Korean ship last year with a torpedo, whether they did or didn't. Of course, the North denies it. And then, of course, what's going on right now is after about a week or so ago, when North Korea was apparently accused of putting landmines out, and 2 South Korean soldiers stepped on these landmines, which then forced South Korea to use its loudspeakers to put out anti-North Korean propaganda, which the North then fired a shot to say, turn down your stereo. And shelling goes back and forth. Now, there's usually a couple exchanges every year, a couple of times a year, 3 or 4 tantrums a year. Usually the North will throw a tantrum to get aid, is usually what it does. Like they'll usually throw a tantrum. But some of the political analysts out there are saying, I got this off the David Pakman show, which he's usually on the other side of the coin from what I from my points of view. But his sources were saying that this is not regular activity for the North. Like it's kind of regular, but there's something. The disbanding of the Navy is kind of new. 50 submarines. We don't know where they went. I'm sure they'll be found fairly easy, but again, we don't know where these submarines would be heading to. My suspect, and this is why they're saying this, is that the North usually throws a tantrum and then they calm down. All they're demanding is that South Korea apologizes to them, and the South is doing whatever, slowly appeasing North Korea. But also the leader in South Korea doesn't want to appear weak to Kim Jong-un, because if she does, then what'll end up happening is it'll kind of give North Korea a false sense of security that they can get away with a lot more. So the problem there is quite simple. If it could escalate into something much, much, much worse. We know North Korea is backed by China, and we know South Korea is backed by the United States, and we also know with Article 5, we get pulled into a nuclear war very quickly with North Korea. Always been kind of, I'd say up to 2010, it was probably the most volatile spot on the planet. When I was a kid, it was always, everybody always speculated that World War III will start in North Korea, because it's at an armistice, not a natural ceasefire. Meaning, you don't shoot, we don't shoot. But however, if you play your stereo too loud, we're going to fire artillery at you and disband our navy out there to God knows where. So the North doing that, where would they be sending their subs? Well, I think they would be sending their subs to go after the people who would be threatening them the most. Not necessarily the South Koreans. Don't get me wrong, the South Korean army is well prepared for the North. They are well prepared for the North for sure. Much better training. They got U.S. equipment, much better. And plus, in light of all this little activity, the United States has sent B-52 bombers to South Korea, and some B-2 bombers to Guam. And stuff like that. So at the end of the day, we can see that people are taking this pretty seriously, and they should. Obviously, they should. The big threat from North Korea is the ballistic missiles. They don't have many, but someone's going to get nuked. The good news is right after that, there is no more North Korea after that. And I don't really know if China will really go to bat for North Korea. It's, you got to look at it logically. Like the North Koreans. Is the useful idiot to China? Sure, to provoke the states, but would they be willing to, get their entire country destroyed over North Korea? Talking about the Chinese, obviously, I don't think they care about the North Koreans that much. They have a border there, and they'll shoot North Koreans that try to defect into China. So, it's. I mean, they let some come in, but they will shoot them coming across the border. So, it really, from the government top level, what people were saying is that Kim Jong-un. Aunt and uncle that he had put to death there for treason and all that, or whatever trumped up charges that they had, were the Chinese connection for the control of North Korea. So Kim Jong-un was basically not really in control, but then he kind of killed off the people that were in control, so technically now he's in control. So that makes China nervous, that makes the United States nervous, that definitely makes the South Koreans very, very nervous. But the nice thing about North Korea, though, is they always win Earth Hour for, least amount of hydro used. Well, it's very easy when everybody there is pretty much living without, you got power to like one major city, maybe 2 cities or 3 cities or whatever for the manufacturing. But they're still in the Stone Age. Like North Korea is this, wow, and yet we look at all these other people like, oh, we got to go overthrow this government, that government. If it was really about, if all these wars around the world were really about U.S. intervention with the foreign policy, were really about humanitarian aid, if there's a country that needs to have its dictatorship overthrown, it's definitely North Korea. That said, why don't we go after North Korea? Is it because they're armed with nukes? Not really. Again, they don't have a lot of nukes, but that doesn't mean you can discount them out. Yes, most of their army is pretty old and stuff like that, but the thing about North Koreans, what I think, obviously the biggest threat they pose to is South Korea. That's the obvious. Does their K-41 missile, I think is their newest missile, it does have a 6,500 mile range, but again, these things are in limited numbers. So yeah, they could do it. They're going to get 1 or 2 nukes out, but after that, there will be no North Korea, because B-52s will